The child's scream pierces the blizzard like a blade wrapped in ice. 8-year-old Emma Castellano stumbles backward through knee-deep snow, her pink pajamas already soaked through, her lips turning blue in the howling wind. The mountain lodge towers behind her, its lights bleeding gold into the white chaos, but the storm has swallowed even that warmth. She is crying. She is terrified. She is cornered against the stone wall by a man whose name she does not know. Douglas Hale stands before her in a dark coat, his frame blocking the only path back to safety. 47 years old, with predator eyes the color of winter, with a smile that has broken countless promises. He reaches toward the child with one leather-gloved hand. Inside the lodge's main room, Aleandro Castellano watches the security monitors. The most feared crime boss in Boston stands motionless by a massive stone fireplace, an expensive whiskey untouched in his hand. His daughter has disappeared around the corner. Then, on the screen, he sees a figure move. A woman in a black and white maid uniform, apron strings flying, sprinting toward the blizzard instead of away from it. The invisible maid is running toward the scream. Sofia Morales did not think. Her body simply moved, driven by something older than fear, something that had learned long ago that silence equals complicity, and complicity equals hell. She bursts through the side door into the storm, visibility near zero, wind tearing at her thin uniform like an animal trying to strip the skin from her bones. Snow stings her face like needles. She is drowning in white. She sees Emma. She sees Hale. She throws herself between them, arms spread wide, her voice shattered like glass against the roaring wind. Get away from her. Not a scream. Something worse. A prayer. Hale's expression shifts. Recognition flickers across his face like a match striking in darkness. His mouth opens into something that is not a smile. Inside, Aleandro's hand tightens around his glass. The room goes silent except for the wind howling through the walls. Enzo, his lieutenant for 15 years, stands frozen beside the window. He has never seen his boss move the way he moves now. One breath later, the room erupts. The back door slams inward. 3 men in black coats surge into the blizzard, their movements synchronized like a machine with a single terrible purpose. Enzo follows, his gun drawn. Behind them, Aleandro steps into the snow, his cashmere coat worth more than Sofia's yearly salary, his expensive shoes sinking into the white, his dark eyes fixed on the maid who has just thrown her body between a predator and his daughter. What Sofia does not know is that Aleandro Castellano has been searching for her for 3 months. It started 6 weeks ago when a lost wallet surfaced, soaked through and half frozen, near the bakery on Newbury Street. Inside was his dead wife's photograph, the one he thought he had lost forever 10 years ago. But something else was there too. A note in careful handwriting, the letters formed by someone unaccustomed to gentleness. The note said only, "I found this near the bakery. The woman in the photo has kind eyes. I hope she watches over you still." He had never found the person who returned it. The handwriting appeared in no databases, no records. It was simply an act of grace from someone invisible, and that impossibility had haunted him every single day. Until he saw her walking through his mansion carrying coffee on a Tuesday morning at 9:07, her eyes fixed downward, her presence so unremarkable that he had walked past her 3 times before something in the way she moved, the carefulness, the smallness, the deliberate invisibility, made him stop. The maid. The invisible one. He had watched the security footage from the day his wallet was found. He had cross-referenced it with the lodge's employment records. And there she was, Sofia Morales, hired 6 months ago, paid $12 an hour, living somewhere outside the system where bosses like him rarely looked. His men had been instructed to find everything about her. But that investigation had been interrupted by tonight, by the blizzard, by his daughter's scream cutting through the storm. Now, in the snow, surrounded by the men he commands, watching Sofia Morales shield a child that is not her own, something cold and dangerous stirs in Aleandro's chest. Something he believed he had buried with his wife. The wind howls like a dying animal. Emma's crying stops. In that sudden quiet, only footsteps on snow and breathing, ragged, terrified, human. the story of Sofia Morales did not begin in a blizzard. It began 6 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning when the sun rose over Boston like a promise no one would keep. Sofia's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned in 2003. The radiator clanked and sputtered, releasing heat only between the hours of 6 and 8 in the morning. She lay in bed for those 2 hours, not sleeping but simply existing in the only warmth available to her, her body positioned under the single working window where the thin November light could reach her face. Her eyes opened at 5:58. Even without a clock, she knew the time. Her body had learned to read the darkness the way other people read watches. The apartment contained a bed, a chair, a small table, and a bathroom where the shower ran brown before it ran clear. On the wall above the bed hung a photograph in a frame that cost her $8 at a thrift shop. It showed a woman with her mother's eyes, standing in front of a church in a dress that had been white once. That was Sofia's mother, taken 2 years before she stopped breathing. Sofia did not look at the photograph anymore. Looking hurt. Instead, she looked at the wall. At exactly 6:15, she rose and dressed in the clothes she would wear to work, black pants with a stain on the left thigh that would not wash out, a white blouse with a button missing, and a cardigan that had belonged to a dead woman in her building. Her shoes had holes in the soles. She lined them with newspaper. Her breakfast was half a cup of coffee and nothing else. She counted her money before she left. $34 in her wallet. 34. That number had to carry her through for days until her next paycheck arrived. $34 divided by 4 days equaled $8.50 per day. She had stopped eating lunch years ago. It was not worth the stomach pain that followed. On the walk to work, 43 minutes through Boston's North End where the buildings pressed down like a fist, Sofia passed a window display showing a foreclosure notice. The number on it was $125,000. Her rent was $700 a month. That meant the foreclosure could have paid for 178 months of her rent. 14 years of housing. 14 years of not freezing. The people who had lived in that house, the people who had written that mortgage, they existed in an entirely different world than the one Sofia inhabited. She had long ago stopped expecting to live in that world. She had learned to fold herself smaller and smaller until she fit into the spaces between other people's lives, the gaps that no one noticed. The Castellano mansion sat on Beacon Hill, surrounded by wrought iron gates that cost more than her annual salary, guarded by men who looked through her rather than at her. She had worked there for 6 months now, always on the evening shift, always silent, always moving through the rooms like a ghost that the living had agreed not to acknowledge. Today, like every day, she entered through the back entrance. Like every day, she did not use the front door. Like every day, the head housekeeper, a woman named Margaret with the eyes of someone who had made peace with disappointment, handed her a list of rooms that needed cleaning. The master bedroom was on the 2nd floor, accessed by a corridor lined with paintings worth millions of dollars. Sofia cleaned those paintings sometimes, carefully, with distilled water and cotton cloth. She never thought about their value. Thinking about it would have made her weep. The master bedroom contained a bed large enough to sleep a family, a closet larger than her entire apartment, and on the mantelpiece, a single photograph in a silver frame. Sofia had seen it before. She always looked at it while she cleaned. The photograph showed a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, standing next to a man who would later become Boston's most feared crime boss. They were both smiling. That was Aleandro Castellano's dead wife. Today, while Sofia dusted the frame, taking care not to disturb it, to move silently, to make her presence invisible, the door opened. She froze. The staff did not come into bedrooms while she worked. There was an agreement about this, an understanding about boundaries and invisibility. Aleandro Castellano stood in the doorway. He was tall, 6'2" at least, with a kind of build that suggested violence lived in his muscles, waiting for permission to emerge. His hair was dark, silvered at the temples in a way that made him look powerful rather than old. He wore an expensive suit in charcoal gray, the kind of suit that cost more than everything Sofia owned combined, and his white shirt was open at the collar, revealing a gold chain and a chest covered in dark hair. There was a scar on his face, running from his right eye to his cheekbone, and it gave him the appearance of a man who had looked directly into the world's cruelty and survived it. Sophia's breath stopped. She lowered her eyes immediately, the way she had been taught to do, the way that kept her safe. "You are Sofia." His voice was deep, solid like an oath, the kind of voice that people obeyed without question. "Yes, sir," she whispered. She did not look up. Looking up was dangerous. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, and she could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing, like a hand pressing against her back. Then he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. Sophia's hands were shaking. She set down the cloth and sat on the edge of the bed, just for a moment, just long enough for her heartbeat to return to normal. She did not know why he had come. She did not know what it meant. She only knew that somewhere in his chest, the most powerful man in Boston had decided to acknowledge her existence, and that acknowledgement felt like a blade passing too close to her skin. Margaret found her 10 minutes later, still sitting on the bed. "Are you all right?" the older woman asked, her voice careful. Sophia nodded. She could not speak. If she opened her mouth, she would tell the truth, that for the first time in years, someone had looked at her and seen something other than nothing. And she had no idea that this moment, this small, terrible moment, would change everything. Within 48 hours, Aleandro Castellano would learn every detail of her life. He would know about her dead mother, her crumpled foreclosure notice warning of an eviction that would arrive in 90 days, her $34, her shoes with holes in the soles. He would know that she had once been someone, that she had been destroyed by someone, and that she had survived by becoming no one. And he would begin to understand that the woman who had returned his wallet, who had written those words about kind eyes and hope, was the same woman he had just seen standing in his bedroom, trying to erase herself from existence. But none of that mattered yet. What mattered now was that Sofia Morales had finally been seen. And in being seen, she had begun to leave the invisible place where she had hidden for so long. The wind outside the apartment building began to pick up, carrying the smell of snow. The snow fell in heavy sheets across the mountain road, each flake a small death against the windshield. Sofia Morales sat in the back seat of the black SUV, her hands folded in her lap, watching the world turn white. She had been riding for 3 hours and 42 minutes. She knew the exact time because she had checked her phone at the start, and since then, she had counted every mile marker like a prisoner counting days until release. The driver did not speak. The radio played classical music, something with violins that made her chest ache. Outside, the trees thinned as the elevation climbed, and the highway became a ribbon of dark asphalt cutting through an endless forest. Sophia pressed her forehead against the cold window. The glass was so cold it burned. She was leaving Boston. She did not know for how long. 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning that had felt exactly like every other Tuesday morning in the past 6 years, Sophia had found a leather wallet on the sidewalk outside the corner bakery 3 blocks from the Castellano mansion. The wallet was expensive, the kind that cost more money than she had ever held at one time in her entire life. Black leather, soft like skin, with a gold clasp that caught the early light. She almost walked past it. Most people would have. But something stopped her. The way it lay there, open, as if it had been waiting specifically for her to find it. Sophia picked it up with trembling fingers and looked inside. Cash. So much cash. She counted quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. $340. Enough to buy another month of her mother's medication. Enough to buy groceries for 2 weeks. Enough to make the numbers stop screaming at her. She should have kept it. Everyone would have kept it. But there was a photograph inside the wallet, and the photograph stopped time. A woman smiled out at Sophia from the glossy paper. The woman was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. She was beautiful in the way that certain people are beautiful, the way that made you believe the world still contained goodness. She had dark hair and kind eyes, and she was holding a small infant girl. The baby could not have been more than a few months old. The photograph had been taken in sunlight, in what looked like a garden, and the woman was laughing. The kind of laugh that made you want to laugh with her, even though you did not know her, even though you could see that she had everything and you had nothing. On the back of the photograph, in a man's handwriting, someone had written, "Maria and Emma, my whole world." 2015. Sofia's hands shook as she held the wallet. She looked at the credit cards inside. The name read Aleandro Castellano. She had heard that name before, whispered in the mansion's kitchen during late-night coffee breaks. The owner. The boss. The man who controlled everything. She looked at the photograph again. The woman named Maria. The baby named Emma. Sofia knew what it was to lose everything. She had held her newborn daughter once, for 17 minutes, before the hospital staff had taken her away. She had never even named her. She had been too young, too broken, too terrified that loving her would somehow make the pain worse. That had been 11 years ago. The baby would be 11 now. She did not know if the baby was alive. Sofia walked back to the Castellano mansion with the wallet in her coat pocket, her heart hammering against her ribs like a bird trying to escape from inside her chest. She did not go to the main office. Instead, she found the head housekeeper, Margaret, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and tired eyes who had never been cruel to Sofia but had also never been particularly kind. "I found this," Sofia said, holding out the wallet. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Outside the bakery. I thought someone should return it." Margaret took the wallet. Her eyes widened when she saw the name. "This is Mr. Castellano's," she said. "How did you?" "I just found it," Sofia said quickly. "I did not take anything." Margaret studied her for a long moment. Sofia could feel the older woman seeing her, really seeing her, perhaps for the first time in the years they had worked together. "Come with me," Margaret said finally. Sofia followed her to the main office, where a young man with dark eyes and a black suit sat at a desk. This was Enzo, the lieutenant, the man who gave orders and answered only to Castellano himself. He looked up when they entered. "The maid found Mr. Castellano's wallet," Margaret said. Enzo stood immediately. He took the wallet from Margaret's hands, opened it, and his face shifted. Sofia could not read the shift. It was the kind of shift that happened on the faces of men who held other people's lives in their hands. "Stay here," he said to Sofia. He left the room without waiting for a response. Sofia stood in the office with Margaret, her knees feeling like they were made of water. The walls were lined with books she would never read. The desk was made of wood that probably cost more than everything she owned. There was a photograph on the desk facing away from her, and a leather chair that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed in suffering. Enzo returned 15 minutes later. Behind him walked a man Sofia had never seen before but whose presence filled the entire room like smoke. He was tall, broad-shouldered, somewhere in his mid-40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. His hair was dark and silvered at the temples. There was a thin scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, and his eyes were the color of a storm sky right before lightning strikes. This was Aleandro Castellano. He looked at Sofia for 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. He did not speak. He simply looked at her, and Sofia felt something shift inside her chest, something dangerous and fragile, like a blade passing too close to her skin. "You returned this," he said finally. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Like the kind of voice that made promises and kept them. "Yes, sir," Sofia said. She kept her eyes down. She had learned long ago that it was dangerous to look powerful men in the face. The money was inside. "Yes, sir." "You did not take any of it." "No, sir." Aleandro Castellano turned the wallet over in his hands. He opened it and looked at the photograph inside. His jaw tightened. For a moment, something broke across his face, something so raw and painful that Sofia had to look away because she was not supposed to see it. She was not supposed to see powerful men in pain. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sofia Morales, sir." "How long have you worked in my home, Sofia Morales?" 6 years, sir. He nodded slowly. He turned the wallet over again, and Sofia saw him pull out a small piece of paper. Her note. She had written it quickly, in the hallway, before her courage could abandon her. The wallet belonged to someone. A woman with kind eyes. Someone who clearly mattered very much. Aleandro read it 3 times. Sofia could see him reading it. She could see something shifting behind his storm-grey eyes, something moving into place like pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for a long time. "Thank you," he said finally. "You can go." Sofia turned and walked out of the office on legs that did not feel like they belonged to her. Margaret followed her, and outside the office, the older woman placed a hand on her shoulder. "That was a kind thing you did," Margaret said quietly. "Most people would not have returned it." "The woman in the photograph," Sofia said. "She seemed like she mattered." Margaret's hand tightened on her shoulder. "She did," she said. "She does. Though he lost her a long time ago." 3 weeks after that Tuesday morning, Sofia received a notice that she was being transferred to the Castellano family's remote property in the northern mountains. It was a temporary assignment, the notice said. Winter staff rotation. She would leave on Monday. She would return in spring. Sofia read the notice 6 times, looking for hidden meaning, looking for threat or punishment. But there was no threat. It was simply a transfer. Simply a change in her routine, the one thing she had learned not to fear more than anything else in the world, because her routine was the only thing that kept her alive. She packed her single battered suitcase. It was the same suitcase she had owned for 9 years, its corners softened by time, one of its latches broken and held together with duct tape. She placed her work uniforms inside, 2 extra pairs of shoes, her underclothes, a hairbrush, the crumpled foreclosure notice that had arrived 3 weeks ago with a red stamp that said final notice. $125,000 in 7 days. Or her childhood home would stop being hers. Or rather, it would stop being anyone's. The bank would take it, sell it, and use the money to pay debts she could never pay. She had $34 left to her name after sending money to her mother in New Mexico. $34, and a eviction notice that felt like a blade pressed against her throat. Now, as the black SUV climbed higher into the mountains and the snow fell thicker, Sofia pressed her forehead against the cold window and thought about the woman in the photograph. Maria. The kind eyes. The baby named Emma. The man who had lost her and still kept her photograph close enough to carry in his wallet. The car rounded a curve, and suddenly the mansion appeared through the snow like something conjured from a dream. It was enormous, 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows, with smoke rising from multiple chimneys into the white sky. There were other cars parked in the circular drive, black SUVs, the kind that meant money and power and dangerous men. The driver pulled up to the service entrance and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was so complete that Sofia could hear her own heartbeat, steady and terrified. She was here. She did not know why, but she was here. And somewhere inside this mansion, in rooms she would clean and hallways she would walk, something was waiting for her. Something that had been set in motion the moment she chose to return a stranger's wallet instead of keeping the money that would have saved her life. The snow continued to fall, burying the world in white. The blizzard screamed against the windows of the mountain lodge like something alive and furious, and in that howling darkness, a child's scream cut through everything else. Emma's voice, high and terrified, echoing down the stone hallways at 3 in the morning. Sofia Morales ran toward the sound instead of away from it, her bare feet slapping against the cold floor, not knowing yet that this single choice would unravel everything she had tried so carefully to hide. She rounded the corner and saw them. Emma backed into the corner of the library, tears streaming down her small face, and Douglas Hale standing between her and the door. His expression was almost gentle, which made it infinitely worse. Sofia's entire body went rigid. Time collapsed. 8 years of running, 8 years of looking over her shoulder, and here he stood in a cashmere sweater that cost more than her monthly rent, reaching toward the child with the same patient smile he had used on her a decade ago. Sofia did not think. She moved. She placed herself between Emma and Hale, her body a shield, her voice somehow steady. "Step away from her." Hale's smile widened. "Sofia. How wonderful to see you again. I was wondering when we might have a private moment." Emma's small hands gripped Sofia's waist from behind. Sofia could feel the child trembling. "If you touch her, I will scream so loud that every person in this house will hear it, and then your entire operation dies tonight." It was a bluff. She was nobody. But something in her voice, some final desperate truth, made Hale pause. The moment stretched like taffy, fragile and ready to snap. Then footsteps thundered down the hallway, and Aleandro Castellano appeared like something conjured from her prayers. He was still half asleep, bare-chested under an open white shirt, his dark eye scanning the scene in one sharp movement. His jaw tightened. "Get away from them," he said quietly. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Enzo and Dario materialized behind him, hands already reaching toward weapons. Hale laughed, a short, dismissive sound, and slowly raised his hands. "Just checking on the child. Making sure she was safe during the storm." Aleandro stepped forward, and Hale actually backed away. "Emma, go with Sofia to the kitchen. Now." Emma did not hesitate. She grabbed Sofia's hand and they moved past Hale, past Aleandro, away from the danger. But as Sofia passed the Mafia boss, she felt his eyes on her, and she understood in that moment that everything had changed. He knew. Something in how she had moved, how she had stepped between a powerful man and a child, had told him a story he was not supposed to know. Now, let us go back to the beginning to understand how Sofia Morales, a delivery girl earning $34 a week, came to stand in a burning mansion with a crime boss's daughter in her arms and a man's life balanced on the edge of a blade. 14 days before the blizzard, Sofia was counting pennies at a kitchen table that wobbled on uneven legs. The apartment was small, one bedroom, a living room with a couch that had been on the curb when she found it, and a kitchen where light came through a single window that looked out at a brick wall. But it was hers. Or rather, it had been. The letter on the table said otherwise. Final notice. $125,000. 7 days. The words blurred as her eyes filled with tears. This house had belonged to her grandmother, then her mother, then her. She had grown up in these rooms, learned to cook on the stove that still worked if you jiggled the handle, had hidden in the closet during her father's violent nights. It was the only thing she owned in the world. And in 7 days, it would belong to a bank that did not care that her mother had Parkinson's, did not care that Sofia worked 60-hour weeks at the delivery service making minimum wage plus tips, did not care that every dollar she could scrape together went to her mother's medications in New Mexico. Sofia pulled the crumpled paper closer and made a list: $7,000 in unpaid medical bills. $32,000 in property taxes her mother had missed while in the hospital. The rest was interest that accumulated daily like a living thing, feeding on her failure. She had $34 in her wallet. $34, and the rent on this apartment was still due in 5 days. The wind rattled the window. Outside, Boston sprawled gray and cold, the kind of November that made you believe winter would never end. Sofia's phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at the delivery service: "Need you at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Double shift. 3 hospitals." She texted back yes, put the foreclosure notice in a drawer she did not want to open, and tried to sleep on the lumpy couch, listening to her mother's voice on a recorded message from 2 weeks ago: "Mija, don't worry about me. Take care of yourself. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." She had not kept that promise. She was drowning. The next morning, Sofia tied her dark hair back with a rubber band and put on the gray delivery uniform, already worn soft from washing. Her feet hurt. They always hurt now. She had developed pain in her left knee from standing at the hospital loading dock for 8-hour shifts, and her hands were calloused from holding paper bags and cardboard boxes. She was 27 years old but looked older, the way poverty ages you from the inside out. The hospital rounds took her to St. Mary's first, then Boston Medical, then Brigham and Women's. Around 3 in the afternoon, while making a delivery to the cardiac unit, she found an expensive leather wallet on the ground near an elevator. She almost kept walking. $34 in her account made her fingers itch to open it. But the photograph slipped out when she picked it up, a woman with kind eyes and dark curls, holding a baby who looked like she had been loved very much. Maria and Emma, the label on the back said in careful handwriting. Sofia's chest tightened. This was someone's whole life. She walked to the information desk and asked them to call the number on the driver's license. I found someone's wallet, she said quietly. The woman at the desk looked surprised. Not many people return things, and within an hour a man arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, expensive in a way that made Sofia's thrift store jacket feel like cardboard. His eyes were dark and penetrating, and there was a scar running from his eye to his cheekbone that made him look dangerous. But when he saw the wallet, his entire body relaxed. He opened it, checked inside, saw the photograph, and for just a moment, his composure broke. Sofia watched him touch the photo of the dead woman. She could tell by how he touched it that the woman was gone, and something in her understood his grief because she carried her own. "Thank you," he said quietly. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Most people would have kept this. Or the money. Sofia did not mention the $34 or the foreclosure notice. The woman in the photograph looked kind. "I couldn't keep it." The man studied her for a long moment, as if seeing through her uniform to the desperation underneath. Then he handed her $200. For returning it honestly. Sofia's hands shook as she took it. $200. With what she had earned today, that was $234 total. She could eat. She could think about the electric bill. "I can't." "You can," he said. Then he walked away, taking his grief with him, and Sofia never expected to see him again. 3 months later, a call came from an agency. There was a temporary position available, 2 weeks of live-in work at a private residence in the mountains. Room and board provided. $15,000 cash. The woman on the phone gave her an address to report to. When Sofia arrived, she was met by a tall man named Enzo in a dark suit, and he handed her a contract that she could not fully read. "Mr. Castellano's household," Enzo said. "You'll handle domestic work. Cook, clean, serve. Stay quiet. Don't ask questions. You'll be isolated from the staff." Sofia nodded. She would have agreed to anything. $15,000 would buy her time. Not enough to save the house, not even close, but enough to keep her mother alive a little longer. Enough to stop counting pennies. So when the black SUV arrived to pick her up on a Sunday morning, Sofia said goodbye to her apartment and her neighborhood and climbed into the back seat, watching Boston disappear in the mirrors. The SUV drove north for 2 hours, climbing higher into the mountains as the sky darkened with storm warnings. The radio crackled about a blizzard moving in fast, accumulation expected to be heavy and dangerous. Sofia pressed her forehead against the cold window and thought about the woman in the photograph. Maria. The kind eyes. The baby named Emma. The man who had lost her and still kept her photograph close enough to carry in his wallet. She did not know yet that she was driving toward the home of the man who had given her $200. She did not know that fate was not random. She did not know that the moment she chose kindness over survival, the entire trajectory of her life shifted onto a new course. The car rounded a curve, and the mansion appeared. It was enormous, 3 stories of dark stone and tall windows, with smoke rising from multiple chimneys into the white sky. Black SUVs were parked in the circular drive, the kind that meant money and power and dangerous men. The driver pulled up to the service entrance, and when he turned off the engine, the silence was absolute. Sofia could hear her own heartbeat, terrified and steady. She had not eaten since yesterday. Her suitcase contained everything she owned that could fit: 2 uniforms, 5 pairs of socks, underwear, a photograph of her mother, and a prayer card her grandmother had given her. She stepped out into the cold, and immediately the wind cut through her thin jacket like something with teeth. Enzo met her at the door, tall and composed, his expression neutral. Minimal staff during the boss's stay, he said, not unkindly. He prefers privacy. You'll work nights mostly, handle the kitchen before dawn, prepare breakfast, keep the house running. When Mr. Castellano and his daughter are present, stay out of sight. Clear. Clear, Sofia whispered. She was led down a hallway, through the main house, and then down a narrow staircase to the servants' quarters. Her room was small, a narrow bed with white sheets, a window that looked out at the gathering storm, a small dresser. There was a lamp on the nightstand. Warm light. She sat on the bed and cried quietly, the kind of crying where your shoulders do not shake, where the tears just fall and fall. Outside, snow had begun to fall in thick sheets, and the wind rattled the window frame like something trying to get in. That night, unable to sleep, Sofia walked the quiet hallways exploring the mansion. That was when she encountered Emma. The child was 8 years old, small for her age, with dark curls exactly like the woman in the photograph. She stood in the hallway in pink pajamas, holding a stuffed rabbit, staring at Sofia with huge, curious eyes. "What's your name?" Emma asked. Sofia froze, not used to being spoken to directly. "Sofia, miss. I'm Emma. Do you like hot chocolate?" Before Sofia could answer, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. Aleandro Castellano, still fully clothed despite the late hour, moved toward them with controlled steps. He was taller than Sofia remembered, his dark eyes sharp with intelligence. Emma immediately ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. He looked down at her with a gentleness that did not match his dangerous appearance, then glanced at Sofia. For just a moment, his eyes held hers. Sofia immediately dropped her gaze and pressed herself against the wall, trying to become invisible. But she felt his attention linger on her before he guided Emma back toward the bedrooms. "Come, Emma. Hot chocolate in the morning, yes." Sofia heard Emma's small voice, "The pretty lady can make it." Aleandro's response was too quiet for her to hear. Over the next 3 days, Sofia fell into a rhythm. She cooked breakfast in the pre-dawn darkness, prepared lunch in the afternoon, managed dinner service in the evening. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, present but unseen. But she watched. She could not help but watch. She saw Aleandro with Emma, patient, attentive, teaching her chess by the fireplace, reading to her before bed, his voice soft as he turned pages of a children's book. She heard him answer when Emma asked about her mother. "She loved you more than anything in the world. She still does, from wherever she is now." Sofia's throat had tightened at those words. She understood loss. She understood the weight of missing someone every single day. But then, on the 4th morning, as snow piled against every window and the lodge manager announced that the roads were sealed, no one in, no one out, for at least a week, everything changed. A man arrived despite the storm. Douglas Hale. 47 years old, charming smile, expensive coat shaking snow from his shoulders. Behind him came a woman, Evelyn Blackwell, a wealthy Boston socialite in furs and diamonds, laughing like the blizzard was an amusing inconvenience. Sofia was setting the table for dinner when she saw Hale, and her hands went numb. The fork she was holding clattered on the floor. His eyes found her across the room, and for just a second, his smile sharpened into something cruel. Recognition. He remembered her. Sofia ran to the kitchen, heart hammering, old scars burning like fresh wounds across her back like a map of hell that she had learned to live with but never learned to forget. She gripped the edge of the sink and pressed her forehead against the cold stainless steel, trying to breathe, trying not to scream. He was here. The man who had owned her for 2 years. The man she had run from 8 years ago. The man whose voice still woke her from nightmares. And somewhere in this mansion, in the rooms where she worked and the hallways where she walked, a child slept peacefully, unaware that danger had arrived, wearing a charming smile and a $1,000 coat. The wind screams like a living thing, tearing at Sofia's thin coat, driving snow into her eyes with the force of shattered glass. She has made it 50 yards from the lodge, 50 yards into the blizzard, and her legs are already betraying her. Her thin shoes, meant for indoor hallways, slip on ice hidden beneath the snow. The cold has stolen feeling from her fingers. Her breath comes in gasps that burn her lungs. She falls to her knees in a snowdrift so deep it swallows her to the waist. Maybe this is mercy, she thinks. Maybe freezing to death in the mountains is gentler than what waits behind her. The foreclosure notice is still in her pocket, $125,000 owed in 7 days. Even if she survives this night, that future waits. Even if she escapes Hale, she has $34 to her name. $34. Not even enough for a bus ticket out of the state. She closes her eyes. The wind howls. The cold seeps deeper, bone by bone, stealing warmth, stealing breath, stealing choice. And then she hears it. A child's scream, distant but cutting through the storm like a knife through silence. Not imagination. Not the wind playing tricks. A real voice. Emma's voice. Sofia's eyes snap open. Every nerve screams at her to curl into this snowdrift and wait for the cold to finish what despair started. But that scream, it pulls her like a rope around her chest. She hauls herself upright, legs trembling, and turns toward the sound. She runs. Falls. Runs again. The lodge appears through the white darkness, lights blazing from the windows. Sofia sees them on the back terrace, the stone wall where Emma sometimes played during clear days. The child in her pink pajamas, backed into the corner. And Douglas Hale between her and the door, his coat open, his hand raised, something silver gleaming in his grip. A knife. Sofia does not think. Does not calculate odds or consequences. She throws her body forward, arms spread wide, and screams, "Get away from her!" Hale spins, surprise flickering across his face for just one heartbeat before fury replaces it entirely. His eyes rake over Sofia, the maid uniform, the recognition hitting him like a punch. "You stupid bitch. I was going to let you run. But now." He lunges. Sofia feels the blade enter her side, a burning cold that steals her breath, that short-circuits every thought into pure animal reflex. She does not move. She does not fall. She keeps her body between Hale and Emma, even as blood blooms across her white apron like a spreading stain, even as her legs threaten to buckle beneath her. Her hands grip the stone wall behind her. She will not move. She will not fall. "Get away from her," she repeats, her voice barely a whisper. Hale pulls the knife free and raises it again, but lights flood the terrace. The back door explodes inward. Footsteps, running, shouting, the sound of a man's roar that carries the weight of absolute command. Hale curses, abandons the knife, and runs into the blizzard. Aleandro catches Sofia before her knees give way. His hands are on her face, her shoulders, her side where blood is soaking through fabric at a rate that steals his breath. His face is above hers, and for the first time since Enzo has known him, in 15 years of service, Aleandro Castellano's eyes are shining with something raw and uncontrolled. "Emma," Sofia gasps. "Safe," he says, and it sounds like a vow. She's safe. Enzo has her. "Stay with me, Sofia. Look at me. Stay with me." But her vision is already blurring, already sliding toward darkness. Inside the lodge, Enzo carries Emma into the main hall, wrapped in a blanket, crying but whole. Her small hands grip his jacket. Dario is already on his phone, shouting coordinates and medical requests to contacts the storm cannot interrupt. His voice is steady, military, the voice of a man accustomed to moving resources like pieces on a chessboard. Aleandro lays Sofia on the sofa by the fire, pressing towels to her wound, but the blood keeps coming, keeps flowing, keeps defeating his hands. His men have never seen him like this. They have seen him order executions with a single glance. They have seen him negotiate with federal prosecutors without showing a flicker of emotion. They have never seen his hands shake. "Get the doctor here now," he roars at Enzo. "I don't care if you have to airlift him through the blizzard, I don't care if you have to pay every cost imaginable. Get him here." "Already done," Enzo says quietly. Helicopter on standby. The moment the snow clears in any direction, they move. Evelyn Blackwell stands in the doorway, her face draining of color as she takes in the scene. The blood. Sofia's pale face. Aleandro's rage. She turns to slip away, but Dario moves with the casual efficiency of a man blocking a doorway he has blocked 1,000 times before. Going somewhere, Ms. Blackwell, he asks, and his voice is polite in a way that suggests violence is a formality away. Outside, Douglas Hale runs into the blizzard, thinking the storm will hide him, thinking the chaos will allow him escape. He makes it to the tree line before he sees them. 12 men in black emerge from the white darkness like ghosts materializing from fog. They do not run. They walk in perfect formation, surrounding him in a circle he cannot break. Their movements are synchronized, military, devastating in their precision. These are not Aleandro Castellano's men. These are the Valentino family. Boston's rival organization. The people Aleandro has traded favors with for 2 decades, stored like coins in a bank, and now he is cashing in every single one. Marco Valentino steps forward, 58 years old, scarred across his left cheekbone, moving with the confidence of a man who has never lost a negotiation. His smile holds no warmth. Douglas Hale, he says, and his voice is gentle in a way that signals danger. Aleandro Castellano called in a favor. He said you hurt someone under his protection. He said you threatened a child. He also said something interesting. Marco pauses, steps closer. He said he doesn't want you arrested. Too public. Too much attention. So he gave you to us. As a gift. Hale's face goes white. His eyes dart left, right, searching for escape. There is none. The circle is perfect. The men are patient. We can make a deal, Hale says, and his voice cracks like thin ice. I have money. I have connections in the city. We can? We don't want your money, Marco says. He nods once to his men. They move. Hale begins to scream as they drag him backward into the blizzard, his hands clawing at snow and wind, his voice breaking as the storm swallows him. No shots are fired. No bodies are left behind. He simply disappears into the white darkness like he was never there at all. Back inside the lodge, Evelyn Blackwell sits in a chair in the main room, forced into position by Dario's silent, overwhelming presence. Aleandro stands over her, still covered in Sofia's blood, and his voice is colder than the mountains outside, colder than the blizzard that is erasing evidence into the snow. You knew what Hale was, he says. You knew what he did to women. And you profited from it. You helped him hunt. Evelyn tries to maintain the facade, tries to pull on the armor of money and social standing. You have no proof. My lawyers are very good. Your accusations are baseless, and I will be pressing charges for this intimidation. Enzo drops a folder on the table in front of her. It lands with the weight of a death sentence. Bank records. Transaction histories. Communications with Hale spanning 7 years. Photographs of victims with dates and times. A complete documentation of her complicity, her knowledge, her choice to profit from suffering. The FBI has had copies for 3 months, Enzo says, his voice flat as a blade. They are waiting for the roads to clear. When they do, you will be arrested at your home in front of your neighbors, your friends, your family. Evelyn's face crumbles. The mask shatters. She lunges at Enzo, screaming obscenities, clawing at him, but Dario is already moving, already restraining her with the casual strength of a man twice her size. She collapses into sobs, and the sound echoes through the lodge like a prophecy of the cell that is waiting. 40 years minimum, Aleandro says, his voice carrying no mercy. Your assets frozen. Your name destroyed. Unlike Hale, you will live long enough to experience every consequence of every choice you made. The doctor arrives by helicopter at dawn, landing on the lodge's helipad as the first light breaks the storm. He works on Sofia through the morning and into the afternoon, The knife wound deeper than initial assessment suggested, but the blade missed her organs by centimeters, the kind of margin that suggests divine intervention or pure chance. Aleandro does not leave her side. He sits in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand, refusing all offers of rest, all suggestions that he should wash the dried blood from his clothes. Emma sits on his lap, pale and silent, watching Sofia breathe. The child has not spoken much since the night before, but her small fingers grip Aleandro's jacket like an anchor. "Is she going to die, Papa?" Emma whispers. "No," Aleandro says, and the certainty in his voice is absolute. "She is going to live because she is the bravest person I have ever met, and brave people do not die in the dark." Sofia's eyes flutter open as sunset fills the room with amber light. The first thing she sees is Emma's face. The second is Aleandro, watching her with an intensity that steals her breath more than the knife wound ever could. "Welcome back," he says softly. Sofia's eyes flutter open as sunset fills the room with amber light. The first thing she sees is Emma's face, small and pale, watching her with the intensity of a child who has learned too young that people disappear. The second is Aleandro, seated in a chair by the window, his dark eyes tracking her every breath like she is something precious and fragile that might shatter if he looks away. "Welcome back," he says softly, and his voice carries a weight that has nothing to do with authority and everything to do with fear, the fear of a man who almost lost something he didn't know he was searching for until the moment it was almost gone. Sofia tries to speak, but her throat is sandpaper, her lips cracked. Aleandro rises immediately, moves to her with the careful precision of someone approaching a wounded animal, and helps her drink water from a glass held steady in his hand. She notices his hands are still stained with blood, her blood, old now, dried in the creases of his knuckles. 3 days, he says, answering the question in her eyes. "The blade missed your organs by centimeters. The doctor called it a miracle. I called it a reason to keep living." He pauses, and something flickers across his face, vulnerability, raw and dangerous. "You took a knife for my daughter, Sofia. You stepped between her and a monster without hesitation, knowing exactly what he was capable of." Sofia's eyes fill with tears. "I couldn't let him hurt her. I know what men like him do to children. I know what they take." Emma moves then, climbing up onto the bed with careful movements, afraid of causing her pain. The child throws her small arms around Sofia's neck and whispers, "You saved me. Papa says you're a hero." Something breaks open inside Sofia's chest, 8 years of silence, of terror, of believing she was worthless, all flooding out at once. She holds the child and sobs, and Aleandro wraps his arms around both of them, creating a circle that feels like a fortress, like protection, like everything she never thought she would have. Later, when Emma has fallen asleep between them, Aleandro takes Sofia's scarred hand in his. "I read your letter," he says quietly. "The one you left before you ran into the blizzard." Sofia's breath catches. She remembers every word, remembers writing it at the lodge's kitchen table with hands shaking so badly the pen could barely mark the paper. Confessing everything, 8 years of abuse, her love for him, her intention to disappear so she wouldn't drag him and Emma into darkness. "I didn't mean to say those things," Sofia whispers. "I had no right." "Sofia." Aleandro's voice is gentle but firm, like thunder wrapped in velvet. "I've spent 3 months looking for the woman who returned my wife's photograph. I've spent 3 weeks watching you move through my lodge like you're invisible, like you're nothing. And I've spent 3 days sitting in that chair terrified that you would die before I could tell you that you're wrong." "Wrong about what?" "About being nobody. About having no right to feelings. About deserving to disappear." He lifts her hand to his lips and kisses her scarred knuckles, the touch reverent, like a prayer. "You're the bravest, most selfless person I've ever known. You saved my daughter's life. You showed me that mercy still exists in this world. I don't deserve you, Sofia Morales, but I'm asking you to stay anyway." Sofia is crying now, unable to stop the tears, unable to speak. "I'm falling in love with you," Aleandro says simply, and the certainty in those words is absolute. By dawn, the storm has passed, leaving the mountains crystalline and clean. Enzo arrives with news that spreads like a blade through the silence. Douglas Hale's body will never be found, disappeared into the wilderness by the Valentino family. Evelyn Blackwell has been arrested by federal agents, charged with human trafficking conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering. 43 years in prison. No possibility of parole. It's over, Aleandro tells Sofia. They can never hurt you again. That afternoon, he hands her an envelope. Inside, a check for $125,000 made out to the bank holding her mother's foreclosure notice, and a deed transferring ownership of her childhood home into her name, free and clear. You saved my daughter, Aleandro says quietly. This doesn't even begin to cover the debt I owe you. Sofia stares at the papers, hands trembling. She thinks of her mother, safe now. She thinks of the home she thought she had lost forever. She thinks of the fact that she is still alive, still breathing, still capable of feeling something other than fear. Thank you, she whispers. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. 6 months later, Sofia stands in the garden of Aleandro's Boston mansion, not as a maid, but as family. She wears a simple blue dress, her hair loose, scars visible on her arms and no longer hidden in shame. Emma runs through the flowers, laughing, and calls her Mama Sofia without hesitation. Aleandro finds her there as the sun sinks toward the horizon, wraps his arms around her from behind, kisses her temple. What are you thinking about? He asks. I'm thinking about the woman I was 6 months ago, Sofia says quietly. The one who believed she was nothing. Who thought she deserved the darkness. And I'm thinking about who I am now. She turns in his arms, looks up at him. You taught me that sometimes the most broken people carry the strongest light. That surviving hell doesn't make you weak, it makes you a warrior. Aleandro cups her face gently. You taught us that mercy still exists. That good people still fight for strangers. That love can grow in the darkest places. Inside, her mother is setting the table for dinner, her hand steady, her face no longer marked by the weight of impossible debt. Enzo and Dario move through the rooms like unlikely protectors, men who have learned that loyalty is not just to a boss, it's to anyone who proves their worth through sacrifice. The clock on the mantel strikes 6, and Sofia thinks about the foreclosure notice, now framed and hanging in her mother's bedroom as a reminder of what was lost and what was found. She thinks about the woman at 19 who believed she would never be free. She thinks about the woman at 30 who learned that freedom is not a destination, it's a daily choice to stand in the light instead of the shadows. After the rain, the sky clears, Sofia whispers, repeating the words her grandmother used to say so many years ago. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. Aleandro kisses her, soft and reverent, and in that moment, Sofia knows that she is finally, truly free. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that they are never truly invisible, that their past does not define their worth, and that miracles can come from the most unexpected places. Subscribe to this channel because tomorrow we have another story that will remind you why mercy, courage, and love are the most powerful forces in the world. Comment below, have you ever met someone who saved you without even knowing it? Let's honor the quiet warriors who change everything. Thank you for watching, and remember, after the rain, the sky clears. Your miracle might be closer than you think.